The year is 2003. In the hushed, climate-controlled archives of the Liberty Farmers Bank, a young analyst named Michael is conducting a legacy audit. He is the grandson of a former bank president, Frank Davies, a name that still means something in this town. Michael is diligent. He is thorough. He pulls the file for the single most profitable agricultural account the bank holds, Vance Farms, a sprawling enterprise of over 2,000 acres, consistently profitable, perfectly managed, and most strangely of all, completely debt-free. For 20 years, not a single loan. Not for equipment, not for land, not for operating costs. It made no sense. Farming on that scale ran on credit. It was the lifeblood. He reads the digital summary. Elara Vance, sole proprietor, leaseholder on the original 320-acre parcel, owner of the other 1,800. He opens the physical file, a thick folder heavy with decades of paper. He sees the standard modern lease agreement, signed in 1982, renewed automatically every 5 years. But tucked behind it, he finds an old interoffice memo, dated October 4th, 1982, from his grandfather, Frank Davies. The subject line reads, John Vance Estate. The memo is brief. Lease on Parcel 7B is void upon tenant's death, not transferable to next of kin. Notify daughter, Elara Vance, of termination. Offer assistance in liquidating farm assets. Michael stops. He reads the words again. Lease is void. But it wasn't void. The farm was thriving. It was the bank's premier client. His fingers, suddenly cold, dig deeper into the file. He finds a carbon copy of a formal letter, sent to Miss Elara Vance. It is a gentle, almost fatherly letter, full of condolences for her loss, full of respect for her father, John, and full of the hard, practical truths of agriculture. The letter explained the bank's position. The lease was terminated. A new one could not be offered. The risk was too great. The letter wished her well in whatever new path she chose. Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This was a refusal, a total, complete, and final refusal. So what happened? How did a voided lease become a 2,000-acre empire? He kept digging. And then he found it. A single piece of paper tucked into a sleeve at the very back. A high-quality photocopy sent by registered mail on October 11th, 1982. It was a document from 1951, a state land grant lease, awarded to veterans of the Second World War. The paper was dense with formal, legal language, but one clause was circled in a steady, determined red ink. Article 4, Section 2. This lease is granted in perpetuity to the lessee, John M. Vance, and his legal heirs, successors, and assigns. And below the dense block of text was a signature, bold and clear. A signature Michael recognized from statues and history books. Adlai Stevenson, the governor of Illinois. The room went silent. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to fade away. Michael looked at the profit reports on his screen. Millions of dollars in revenue. Zero debt. Then he looked at his grandfather's kind, certain, dismissive letter. And in the gap between the two, a story began to form. A story about being told you can't, and the quiet, devastating work of proving you can. This channel tells the stories of people who were counted out, people who refused to accept the limits others placed on them. If you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe, because what happened to Elara Vance is a story you need to hear. Let me tell you what happened in 1982. It begins not with anger, but with grief. John Vance died on a Tuesday in September. a heart attack while mending a fence line. He was 62 years old. He left behind a 320-acre farm and a 27-year-old daughter named Alara. The farm was not rich. It was not famous. It was a life, carved out of the flat, black Illinois soil. A life granted to him after the war. He had been a good farmer, honest, hard-working. He paid his bills on time. He paid his rent to the state, through the bank, every year. $3 an acre. A rate set in 1951. A rate that never changed. The dirt was good, but the margins were thin. He ran old equipment. A 1968 John Deere 4020 that coughed black smoke. A combine that was always breaking down. He made it work. He always made it work. Alara had grown up in the cab of that tractor. She knew the smell of diesel and dust. She knew the feel of the seasons, the anxiety of a dry spring, the relief of a gentle rain. After college, she had come home, not because she had to, because she wanted to. She loved the land. She loved her father. She learned the books. She learned the markets. She learned the quiet language of the fields. When he died, there was no question in her mind. The farm was her home. It was her future. It was her father's legacy. She would continue it. The funeral was small. Neighbors brought casseroles and condolences. The pastor spoke of a good man gone to his rest. Frank Davies was there, the president of Liberty Farmers Bank. He put a hand on Alara's shoulder, a kind, warm hand. He told her, "Your father was one of the finest men I knew." He told her, "If there is anything you need, anything at all, you come see me." She believed him. A week later, she walked into the bank. It was a brick building on the town square, cool and quiet inside. It smelled of old paper and quiet money. Mr. Davies greeted her with a sad, gentle smile. He led her back to his office. The walls were covered in plaques: Chamber of Commerce, Rotary Club, Church Deacon. He was a man who belonged, a man who was trusted. He gestured for her to sit. He had her father's file on his desk. He put on his reading glasses. He opened it slowly. "I was so sorry to hear about John," he said, "a real pillar of this community." Alara nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Davies. I'm here to make sure the lease transfer goes smoothly. I want to keep the farm running." Mr. Davies stopped shuffling papers. He looked at her over the top of his glasses, a long, quiet look. It was not unkind. It was appraising. He sighed, a soft, paternal sound. "Alara," he said, "farming is a hard business. You know that. Your father was one of the best, and he barely scraped by some years." "I know," she said. "I've been doing the books for 5 years." He nodded, as if indulging a child. Doing the books and running the whole operation are two very different things. This new equipment, the costs are astronomical. The fuel prices, the seed costs. It takes a huge line of credit just to get the crop in the ground. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. "I have a plan." Mr. Davies leaned forward. He folded his hands on the desk. His voice dropped, became more confidential, more caring. "Alara, the lease your father had, it was a special arrangement, a post-war program. It was tied to him, personally. With his passing, the lease is, well, it's void." The words hung in the air. Void. Alara felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she said. "That can't be right. It's our home." "I know this is difficult to hear," he continued, his voice full of practiced sympathy. "And believe me, this is the last thing I want to be telling you. But the state requires the bank to manage these leases responsibly, and leasing a 320-acre operation to a single young woman with no primary operator experience," he shook his head slowly, "it wouldn't be responsible. I would be setting you up for failure, and I'm not going to be the man who lets John Vance's daughter go bankrupt. I can't do it." He was so certain. He was so kind. He wasn't being cruel. He was protecting her. That was the part that hurt the most. He genuinely believed she was incapable, and he was saving her from herself. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, not by a rival, but by someone who cared about you. Someone who thought they knew your limits better than you did. There is no anger you can use against that. There is no fight you can have. It is a quiet, suffocating kindness. Tell me in the comments if you've ever felt that. Because Alara Vance felt it in that quiet bank office. She felt herself being erased, gently, respectfully, for her own good. Mr. Davies went on. He laid out a plan for her. The bank would help her sell the equipment. At a fair price, of course. They would help her find a new tenant for the land, a good, established farmer. She would have a nice little nest egg. She could move to the city, get a job, start a new life. It was a sensible plan. A practical plan, a plan that did not include her. Alara stood up. Her chair scraped against the polished floor. The sound was loud in the quiet room. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just looked at him, at this good, kind, certain man. And she felt something she couldn't quite name. Not anger, not despair. A cold, hard resolve. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Davies," she said. Her voice was flat. She turned and walked out of the bank, out into the bright, indifferent sunlight. She didn't go back to the farm, not yet. She went to the county courthouse, to the dusty records room in the basement. She spent 3 hours looking for it, and then she found it. The master file for the 1951 Veteran Land Grant Program. She found the original charter, and she read the words her father had told her about since she was a girl. He would say it while they were fixing a tractor, or watching a storm roll in. "The government gave us this chance, Alara. They put it in writing. The ink holds." She found the clause. And his legal heirs, successors, and assigns. The ink held. She went home, to the quiet farmhouse, the place they told her she could no longer live. She walked into her father's small office. She opened the heavy, black lockbox where he kept his important papers. His discharge papers from the army, her mother's death certificate, and the original lease. It was on thick, creamy paper, heavy in her hands. The state seal was embossed in the corner, and Governor Stevenson's signature was at the bottom. It felt more real than the bank, more real than Mr. Davies's certainty. She sat at the kitchen table. She took out a single sheet of paper. She made a perfect photocopy of the lease. She circled the clause. She wrote a short, simple note, a note that was not angry, a note that was not pleading, a note that was a statement of fact. She put it in an envelope. She sent it by registered mail. She didn't wait for a reply. She went out to the barn, and she got to work. This is where the story changes. This is where a quiet act of defiance becomes a revolution. Because the bank was put in a difficult position. They had a letter from a dead man's daughter and a copy of a document signed by a political legend. To fight her would mean a public court battle, a battle against a grieving daughter, a battle against a war hero's legacy, a battle against a document that was legally ironclad. Or they could just cash the check. On March 1st, 1983, Alara Vance walked into the Liberty Farmers Bank. She did not ask to see Mr. Davies. She went to a teller. She pushed a check across the counter for $960. Rent for 320 acres. The teller looked at the check. She looked at Alara. She called the manager. The manager disappeared into the back. Minutes passed. Alara waited. She did not fidget. She did not look away. The manager returned. He gave the teller a slight nod. The teller stamped the check. She pushed a receipt back to Alara. The bank had made its decision. They would not help her. But they would not stop her. She was on her own, completely and utterly alone. And that is exactly how she wanted it. Let me tell you about the next 20 years. It started with a sale. She sold her father's beloved John Deere 4020. The neighbors thought she was giving up, liquidating, just like the bank said she would. She took the $8,000, cash. She didn't buy a new, bigger tractor. She bought 2 small, used Kubota tractors from the 1970s, models the big farmers laughed at. They were nimble. They were fuel efficient. They cost her $5,000 for the pair. Cash. The first year, she couldn't afford the fertilizer, the pesticides, the herbicides, the inputs her neighbors poured onto their fields by the truckload. Mr. Davies, driving by on a Sunday after church, saw her fields. He shook his head with a sad resignation. He had tried to warn her. But Alara wasn't trying to farm like her neighbors. She had her father's old almanacs. She had books from the university extension. She planted corn. But in the fall, she didn't leave the fields bare. She planted clover, a cover crop. The old men at the diner scoffed. She's planting weeds. But the next spring, she tilled the clover back into the earth. It had fixed nitrogen in the soil, free fertilizer. Her corn yield that year was 130 bushels per acre. Her neighbors, with their expensive chemicals, got 170. They laughed. They patted each other on the back. But then the math came. Their input cost was over $150 per acre. Her input cost was $12. They netted $20 an acre. She netted $118. She was making 6 times more money on less corn. The laughing stopped. It was replaced by a confused silence. The next year, she took a third of the farm out of production. She planted it with native grasses, letting the soil rest. The community doubters grew louder. She's lazy. She's letting good land go to waste. But the year after, when she planted on that rested soil, it exploded. The earth was dark and rich and full of life. Her yields jumped to 160 bushels, then 180, then 200, all with minimal inputs. She was not just farming, she was healing the land, and the land was rewarding her. The expansion began in 1988. The farm next door went bankrupt. The owner was a good man. He had farmed the way everyone else did. He had massive loans, massive equipment. The farm crisis of the 80s wiped him out. The bank foreclosed. The land was put up for auction on the courthouse steps. Mr. Davies was there, overseeing the sale. He expected one of the big operators to buy it. Then Alara Vance stepped forward. She bid on the first 80-acre parcel. Her bid was low, but it was the only one. The auctioneer called it, sold, to Miss Alara Vance. Mr. Davies watched, stunned, as she walked to the clerk's table and paid for 80 acres of prime Illinois farmland in cash, the money she had saved, from her higher profits, from her lower costs, from her refusal to take on debt. It was the first domino. 1991. Another neighbor retires. He doesn't want to see his family farm go to a corporation. He remembers John Vance. He sees how Alara cares for the land. He sells her 120 acres, below market value. She pays him, cash. 1995. The commodity markets crash. Farmers who are leveraged to the hilt are in trouble. Alara has no leverage. She has only profit. She buys another 250 acres, cash. Mr. Davies would see her at the co-op. She would be there in her work boots and jeans, quiet, polite. Her account was always in the black. He would see her name in the county ledger. Vance, E. Another parcel, another deed. He saw the new grain bins she built, paid for in cash. He saw the new, modern combine she bought in 1998, a Gleaner R62. She didn't finance it through the bank. She paid the dealer with a check, a personal check, for the full amount. He felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't regret, not yet. It was a deep, unsettling confusion. His certainty, the kind, paternal certainty he had felt in his office that day, was eroding. It was being washed away by a quiet tide of facts, by yields, by profits, by acres, by cash. By 2003, Vance Farms was an empire. 2,120 acres, a diversified operation. Corn and soy, yes, but also organic vegetables sold direct to restaurants in Chicago. A small herd of grass-fed cattle. A team of 5 full-time employees. All of them paid well above the local average, with health insurance and retirement benefits, unheard of for farm labor. She had become one of the most successful farmers in the state, and she had done it without borrowing a single dollar. She had done it by being told no. The refusal was not an obstacle. It was a liberation. It freed her from the conventional path, the path of debt, the path of dependence. It forced her to be smarter, more creative, more resilient. The bank's rejection was the greatest gift they could have given her, and they never even knew it. Which brings us back to 2003, to Michael Davies sitting in the bank archives, holding the evidence of 2 different worlds, the world his grandfather believed in, and the world Elara Vance had built. He closed the file. He took it with him. That evening, he went to his grandfather's house. Frank Davies was 80 years old now. Retired for a decade, still respected, still certain in his ways. He was sitting on his porch, watching the sunset. Michael sat down next to him. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he opened the file. He showed his grandfather the memo from 1982. The old man nodded. "I remember this. John Vance's girl. A shame what happened to her father." Michael then showed him the profit and loss statements for the last 20 years. He showed him the land acquisition records, paid in cash. He showed him the asset valuation. Frank put on his glasses. He read the numbers. His hands began to tremble, just slightly. "This can't be right," he whispered. "This is Vance Farms? Elara Vance?" Michael just nodded. The old man stared at the papers, his lifetime of experience, his knowledge of the markets, his certainty about how the world worked. It was all contradicted by the black ink on these pages. He had been so sure he was saving her, and all he had done was make her path harder. And in doing so, made her stronger than any of his other clients. "Drive me out there," he said. His voice was thin. Michael drove him out of town, past the fields of the big operators, fields that were neat and tidy and dependent on the bank's credit line. Then they turned onto the road to the old Vance place. It was no longer the old Vance place. The farmhouse was the same, but it was surrounded by new buildings, a large modern machine shed, towering grain silos that gleamed in the late sun, a packing house for vegetables. Fields stretched to the horizon. The soil was black and healthy. It looked different from the neighboring farms, more alive. They saw a truck being loaded near the packing house, a refrigerated truck with the name of a high-end Chicago restaurant on the side. And standing there, directing the loading, was a woman in her late 40s. Her hair was tied back. Her face was weathered by the sun. She moved with a purpose, an authority that needed no announcement. It was Elara Vance. Frank Davies got out of the car. He walked slowly, unsteadily, across the gravel yard. Elara saw him coming. She stopped what she was doing. Her expression didn't change. She just waited. He stopped a few feet from her. The banker who had held her future in his hands. The farmer who had refused to let him. He looked at the empire she had built, an empire born from his refusal. He tried to find the words. Sorry wasn't enough. I was wrong felt hollow. Finally, he just said it. I didn't think you could do it. He said it like a confession. Elara looked at him, and for the first time, Frank Davies saw her not as John Vance's little girl, but as the formidable woman she had become. She was not angry. She was not triumphant. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through 20 years of history. The problem, Mr. Davies, she said, was not what you thought. The problem was that you were certain. She held his gaze for a moment that stretched into an eternity. Then she turned back to the truck driver. All right, Bill, she said, let's get this on the road. She never looked at Frank Davies again. He stood there for a long time, a monument to a kindness that had been a cage, and a certainty that had been a blindness. He finally understood. Proving someone wrong who is trying to be cruel is a fight. Proving someone wrong who thinks they are being kind, that is the loneliest work there is. But that is not the end of the story, because a legacy is not what you build for yourself. It's what you build for others. Elara Vance never married. She never had children of her own. The farm was her child, and its legacy would spread far beyond its fence lines. In 2005, she established a foundation. She didn't put her own name on it. She named it the 1951 Fund, in honor of the lease that gave her father a chance. Its mission was simple: to provide zero-interest operating loans to farmers who were denied credit by traditional banks, especially women, especially minorities, especially young people with new ideas. The people the system was designed to overlook. The people the Frank Davieses of the world were protecting from failure. The first loan was for $10,000 to a young Hmong family in Wisconsin who wanted to start an organic flower farm. The bank had laughed at them. The 1951 Fund wrote them a check. Today, their flowers are sold in markets across the Midwest. Another loan went to a black farmer in Mississippi. His family had been sharecroppers for generations. He wanted to buy his own land. No bank would touch him. The 1951 Fund financed his first 40 acres. He now farms over 500, and he sits on the board of the fund. The stories stacked up, year after year. A woman in Oregon starting a vineyard, a veteran in Colorado building greenhouses, each one a story of a door being slammed shut by a bank and a window being opened by Elara Vance. She never met most of them. She didn't want the praise. She just wanted the work to continue. Her own farm became a center for regenerative agriculture. Universities sent their students to study her methods, the methods born of necessity, the cover crops, the managed grazing, the no-till planting. The things the neighbors had once laughed at, they were now the cutting edge, the gospel of a new generation of farming. She proved that you could be profitable and sustainable, that you could enrich the soil, not just mine it. She proved the doubters wrong on a scale they could never have imagined. Mr. Davies passed away in 2010. His obituary called him a pillar of the community, a man who helped build the town. No one mentioned the name Elara Vance, but his grandson Michael knew. He left the bank a year after their visit to the farm. He went to work for the 1951 Fund. He runs their loan review program. He spends his days looking for the people his grandfather would have overlooked. He spends his days fighting certainty. Today, if you visit the headquarters of Vance Farms, it still feels like a working farm, not a corporate office. But in the main building, in a simple wooden frame, hangs the original 1951 lease. The paper is yellowed. The ink is faded, but it is there, the physical artifact of a promise kept. Her father's words echo in that quiet room. The ink holds. It held for him. It held for her. And through her work, it holds for hundreds of others. Ilara Vance is in her late 60s now. She still walks the fields. She still drives a tractor. She never speaks of what happened in 1982. She doesn't have to. The land speaks for her. Every healthy acre, every profitable harvest, every new farmer given a chance. It is all her quiet, devastating answer to the man who told her no. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. It cannot be fought with anger. It can only be disproven, with decades of work, with a quiet, unshakable belief in your own capabilities, with a piece of paper that says they are wrong. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is sitting in an office, and they are being told, kindly and gently, that their dream is impossible. They are being told no for their own good. This story is for them. Let it be the ink that holds for you. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their quiet work matters, that their lonely fight is seen. And subscribe for more stories of the people who build their own tables when they are denied a seat at another's.